Just joined. Go ahead and call the meeting to order, and I'll ask for roll call, please.
Monterey,
Here.
Castroville,
Here.
Delray Oaks, Marina Coast,
Here.
Sand City. Have a quorum.
Okay. And any additions to the agenda?
No additions.
Approval of agenda?
So move. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any public comment? We'll bring it back to the council, sorry, to the committee. All those
They both begin with C.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Go to public comment. Anybody in the public wish to speak on items that are not on today's agenda? All right. Seeing none, we'll move to item number 6, consider approval of Budget Personnel Committee meeting minutes from January 10th, 2025.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. Let's take it out to the public. Any public comments on the approval of the minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving to item number 7, review billing procedures and options for FY 25-26. We'll pass it to Paul.
Thank you, Tyler. So as you well know, on the January 27th board meeting, Director Williamson requested that we bring an item back to discuss the billing process, and in particular, our third-party billing vendor or partner, as it may be. I think everyone's aware of the history that last year we were pursuing moving our invoicing to the Monterey County tax rolls as a fee, and that did not pass, and we did not move forward with it. We can certainly go into more detail on any of that you would like. We obviously have Rachel, Johanna, and Mike here that know it intimately well. Sorry, I think they're all twitching at this point.
I don't think Tyler will get a Valentine from them.
So in terms of consideration, I think we all know why we started this. Certainly one was our third-party billing agent. Now, there are some customer not customer deficiencies, but customer service deficiencies that we would like to offer. Secondly, just the efficiencies within the customer service department and getting the invoicing out, having it on the tax rolls, and some cost savings there, as well as the liens that in the future we wouldn't be liening the properties as we do now. In the agenda item, it does lay out what those efficiencies are, what the administrative issues are moving forward. And so it's somewhat critical that the board make a decision one way or the other in February of this year, because compared to last year, our runway is pretty short. Now, having said that, the 3 people I just mentioned have huddled up and they know it really well. And they put together these tasks that you see before you that allow us to accomplish this in a slightly different manner than we did last year. We did a ton of outreach, as you well know. So it actually has the customer outreach plan and implementation later on after the board approves it, so we don't get out in front to the customers. Last year, we had a number of customers going, "What do you mean? I've already gone down this path. I've changed things." So we're sort of pumping the brakes on that. There is a number of specific items that we would request that the board make a decision on, whether we want to pursue the collection of our sewer fees on the Monterey County tax rolls as our new billing partner. Certainly, let's talk about the customer assistance program, because that was critical last year. And certainly from a timing perspective, we need to get rolling on that. Third is if we want to work with some of our member entities that didn't move to the tax rolls. Certainly, Castroville and Monterey did. Hi, Marianne. No worries. But we still have...
Moss Landing did, but...
Yeah, Moss Landing did. But we would still have Pacific Grove, Seaside County Sanitation Districts, and the City of Salinas to work with. And then lastly, we would ask that the board, next board meeting, actually authorize to schedule, advertise, and hold a public hearing like we did last year for that final vote. And that would be on the June 30th board meeting. Those are the steps that we'd need to go through to accomplish moving our billing to the tax roll. Now, of course, there's always the option, stay as we are, or find a different third-party vendor. Beyond just the administrative parts that you see here, as you well know, we're moving to a new ERP program. It came to the board last time, Oracle NetSuite. That sort of information of which way we're heading would be very helpful as they plan the implementation over the next 18 months. So with that, actually, any of you have any additions or just respond to questions? Stop twitching. Okay. With that, be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, are there any questions by the committee? Thank you for the report.
Yeah, let me, if I may. So if we do this and it gets approved by whatever 2/3 majority, well, that wouldn't be what happens in February. That would be something that would happen in June or
June.
July.
Correct.
probably.
Thank you for that clarification, Tom. So February is not a commitment to go through with this. It is truly direction on all those items I said. Staff, start moving. That is just a simple majority that would be needed. And I'll look to Jim to correct me if I'm wrong there. But the 2/3 vote, the supermajority, would be the June 30th vote, which actually is after the public hearing and approving the resolution and all that good stuff. Either a weighted vote or standard vote.
So as we went through this process.
Yeah,
I'm
Jim, sorry.
Go ahead, Jim.
I think we should look at this because actually from the adventure last year, we determined that we could do this in a two-step process whereby we could adopt the resolution to put the items on the tax rolls ahead of the June hearing to approve the rate or to approve the amounts being sent to the county, which would solidify whether we're going to do it or not ahead of you doing all the staff workup like you did last year.
That's true. The way the team has it scheduled is, I think all the data would be ready to go by the 1st of April. Is that true? 1st of what?
May.
Of May. So whether we do the vote in May or June, that work is done.
You'll always want to take your rate report, as Jim mentioned, as close to August 1st as possible for accuracy.
That's why that June 30th board date is nice this particular year.
We have not, explored splitting it up into two separate votes.
Okay.
Maybe a
Paul, there's
resolution.
two separate steps that you're talking about. One is the authorization to collect them on the tax rolls, which is the
Right.
resolution. And then the approval of the report to go to the county. And you're going to go, if you do it this way, you'll do it like you did last year, and you're going to not know the outcome until you go through the trouble of preparing the report and everything else.
So when we went through this process last year, recall extensive discussions before the board and between the board and staff about the various aspects of this. But it was certainly a learning process that we went through. And in hindsight, there were a couple of issues that I think didn't get socialized or surfaced well enough. One of those issues is we would be moving from billing every 2 months to effectively once a year, even though the revenue might come in twice a year. But the amount that a particular customer would be charged for a year would be set prior to that year, a month or two prior to that year for the year. So one thing we didn't talk about is how do we handle a customer account that experiences changes partway through the year? Right? Maybe they go, I forget what our term is for going dormant. The house is, the property's empty, water's turned off, there's no water service, so there's nothing going into the sewer system, and we have a different rate for that. So how do we handle those rate changes? How would changes of ownership that happen during the year be handled so that maybe that's all automatic within the county tax assessor's office. I don't know. But that would be a question we'd probably want to have answered.
So that's actually as part of our administrative procedures, we would look at the implementation of a billing adjustment policy and process and talk to the board about that. For those exact instances when someone sells a house or, like you said, no one's there and they don't expect someone to be there for 6 months, that is a policy and process that we would bring back to the board.
And certainly there's also a fair amount of new construction going on in certain parts of our service area that we know about. How do we handle those new ones that have missed the annual cycle?
Yes, and the city of Monterey moved forward with collecting their fee for wastewater collection on the tax roll this year. So we are actually working with their staff right now and in the beginning phases of the development of a billing adjustment policy that could result in over or under billing, typically related to a categorical change. So a different type of business comes into a unit, or your example, a business or a residential property becomes vacant. When a home sells, it's our understanding that the property taxes get prorated. Basically, it's part of the sale. So for some of those, we wouldn't have to do a billing adjustment, but there absolutely will be billing adjustments throughout the year for categorical changes.
So I would certainly urge, if we decide in February to head down this road again, I would certainly urge staff to have a draft of those policies ready to go concurrently with this, not to add to your workload, which is already big enough, if we go down this road. And then is there any way to be able to publish? Well, okay, two questions. So when we got to the famous vote last June, my board packet was about 1,000 pages thick because we listed every single assessor's parcel number within our service area and the exact amount associated with that. And if I recall correctly, we also had the owner's name. We had more than the APN in that database. Correct me if I'm wrong.
In the final, we didn't, but in the first draft, there was.
So
Okay.
the one in June, we did not, but the one in, I guess, last May, we did. Okay.
Correct.
So was that was the scrubbing of the names a consequence of realizing we shouldn't be putting the names in there because of PII issues or laws, or was that just a routine procedural thing?
Honestly, legal gave us a template that we followed in May, that some of our other special districts follow. And when we came to June, we were having a hard time formatting it on the page. So we cut out unnecessary columns.
Okay, certainly I'd like to have legals weigh in on whether or not we should even be publishing, even though I understand you can look up an APN and find a person's name, should we even be publishing name PII information in our packets? That's question number one about that 1,000 pages. The other question is there some way that we can not have to print those things because we're killing trees with that one. Can we meet all the legal notice requirements just electronically? Another question. Don't expect answers right now.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
Takes.
Director Carbone?
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just wondering since, and I apologize for being late, even though Scott Donaldson left for me.
Either he drives fast
Under
or
the
you drive.
bus.
The mayor of Monterey was here first.
I left first though, so.
But my question is, I wasn't at that last meeting where, well, I was via Zoom
Right.
at that last meeting. And I seen it was pretty contentious with the public that came in, and that there were questions that we had heard, and I don't know if this opens it all back up. But I like maybe it's maybe half opened, but I remember something about commercial properties, about if it is a you have homes where they have a I don't want to call it government, but they have a
Homeowners Association.
homeowners association. Thank you. Did we look at that too? Again, it's just because this has been so far behind that it, that is just something that I recall. Were there any things that we seen from the last, information and things that got brought up that we have addressed to help calm some of this stuff as we go on to bringing this back?
So some of it, yes, but not all of it. And I think we need to be completely honest about it. What we heard here was whatever it was, 20 people that were upset. Some of them renters, and some of them homeowners associations and others. In looking at the numbers, there are a certain number of our customers that I'm thinking about for renters will ask that the renter pay the bill. They ask customer service, hey, instead of sending the bill to me, or send me a bill, but send it to my renter and they'll pay it. And that was a large issue, if you remember correctly, back then. Well, it's still an issue. And I think the team has done a great job in trying to address it. But we got to understand that's only 5% of the, I'm sorry, 2% of the residences. So out of our 53,000 residential accounts, that amounts to about 1,300. So it is a small amount. Now, you shove 1,300 people in this room, that's a fair amount. I get that. But we are looking at a small percentage. Now, on the homeowners thing, something I wanted to point out also, Tom, to your question earlier, is depending what occurs at the February board meeting, we intend to come back in March with a more detailed implementation plan. So talking about HOAs a little bit more, talking about what do we do when a home sells or changes. Those are sort of the details we're certainly trying to address. Will we address everything to everyone's satisfaction? Probably not, but we're trying to. Last year when people were like, hey, we can't save our money for 6 months and pay on the property taxes. Well, luckily the county came up with this Easy Smart Pay, so people are able to pay on a monthly basis. So we're trying to address the interests of all the groups, but by no means are we going to make everyone happy. My point in saying that is it is a relatively small percentage of customers where there's a renter paying the bill. And frankly, we don't know if it's a renter paying the bill or if I send the bill to my property manager who pays. So of that 2%, there's some mix in there. And then on the commercial side, it's about 5% of the commercial accounts that have a tenant pay. So I think always to keep in mind, we will absolutely work with everyone and try to address their concerns and interests to the best that we can.
And then, so, but one of the concerns was with the HOA.
HOAs and how they're handled.
Because they said that those fees were paid in to the, I
Association.
don't know if it was their monthly or however they do it. But they felt that they would be getting billed twice. Is there a workaround that we could do to alleviate those, the concerns of those folks?
Yeah, I'll ask Rachel and Mike and Johanna to talk to that, because you guys met with a lot of homeowners associations, or at least Zoomed and chatted and everything else.
So I'm glad you brought that specific topic up, Marianne, because something that's really important to remember about the public hearing is that the public hearing is a protest vote. So the feedback you heard directly coming out tended to be those protesting, those casting a vote against this. So we did meet with HOAs, and we actually heard from a variety of people specifically related to the HOA topic, on some actually wanting to be direct billed for sewer, because then they had no idea what our bill was, because they just pay their HOA fee and that covered sewer. So they didn't know what they were paying their HOA for sewer. So some actually liked the added transparency that this created. Because the HOAs were, though, of the feedback received, more frequently brought up topic, we did talk internally, and something that we are exploring is there is a potential that we could bill the HOA for the the HOA's property tax bill for the entirety of that residential unit, all of those parcels, and then they wouldn't change their payment structure. But I wouldn't actually want to, we're still looking into it, and I think we would want to do more direct feedback to see if that's actually what they would want, that the HOA continue to pay it on their behalf, or if they would want it directly on their parcel's property tax bill.
Thank you. And in maybe Sand City's case, those are contracts in the HOAs that already been entered into. But for Sand City, we're gonna be having a big development starting up within the year on housing. And those are gonna be just a whole bunch of apartments, a whole bunch of units. But so if people knew ahead of time, could they include, I don't know if they'd include that, or how they'd figure that out if they were to do rents, or it's ultimately if they own the lot, they own the site, this development. So same thing like the hotel, they have their site, so they're responsible for, which we've already went through one, because we've already heard that. But for new developments, if we could think about something or some outreach so that we could have the problem solved before, ahead of time, so that we would have something to talk with these people about. I know Seaside too has apartments on Broadway, and I don't know if that those are going to be a lot of rentals, and if that would be the same scenario, that it's a developer who owns it. How would you address that if you're don't want to send bills personally to renters who don't, where the bill has to go with the, to the property owner, to the tax roll. So, just food for thought.
Okay, Committee Member Donaldson.
Yeah, so I also apologize for being late, but I do follow the speed limit. And my bus probably can't exceed the speed limit.
You have
So,
to
yeah,
with your bus.
there you go. Yeah, when I heard about what happened, I'm so sorry because of all the hard work that the staff put in on that program. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of time you spent and how well the outreach was done. So I was just really sad to hear that. One of the things before I left the board before, that seemed to be kind of the path to compromise was the opt-out. And I don't know if you've already discussed that, but once again, there was a lot of time between me leaving the board and the actual vote happening. And I don't know if that's a viable option, but it seemed at that point, Salinas was kind of looking that direction. I think Seaside might have been as well. So was there any discussion, or do you see a benefit of potentially offering that?
So in reference to what occurred last year, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we looked at that opt-out and we tried to base it on the same percentages that 3CE is doing, which was about 3% of properties. And we were looking at that with a sunset. So that opt-out would be good for, I forget if we said 2 or 3 years, something like that.
Gave multiple ranges. Mhm.
So ultimately, everyone would be on the tax rolls within 3 years, let's say. And I think through the board discussion and the back and forth, it was like, we're going to go do that anyway. Why don't we just, I think I remember a quote of, why don't we just rip the Band-Aid off now and get this done? So at this point, we haven't really looked into that opt-out or not. Yeah, it's problematic in one sense, from the standpoint, depending on the number that, if the board decides to do an opt-out and there is whatever the percentage may be or the number of customers, obviously we would need to maintain some sort of third-party vendor or ourselves produce those bills and send out. Is that insurmountable? No, we could do something like that as long as it's not like 30,000, because then we'd be, having our feet in 2 separate boats as they go different ways. But we could certainly talk about that. Was there any other input on the opt-outs that we went through?
I would just offer that when we got to the end, the question wasn't a negotiation. It was, we don't want to do this.
Yeah, because it seems like to me that, you could satisfy some of the folks that came in opposing it, or ones that opposed it and didn't come in, by offering that. And at least you're addressing that their concerns are valid and so on. And it's always that balance. Do you just tell them, hey, too bad, rip the Band-Aid off, we're done. But what you risk is all falling apart. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
So, I understand you got to find that balance there, but it's kind of like you have to at least address those concerns out there and some sort of action that satisfies that. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't go through the entire process with that.
On this topic.
Those are my thoughts.
I would just add one more point, which is, I'm not sure if anybody recalls this, but when it became clear that they were going to not support us moving forward, I specifically articulated, could we look at the opt-out? And there was just not the willingness to consider that. So, did you want to add something?
Yeah, on the opt-out topic, the one in that discussion, even before we got to the point where we knew that the proposed package was not going to pass, the one thing we didn't talk about, the fact is that let me back up a little bit. The whole point of doing this was to create, number one, create some substantial savings for our customers across the board. And number two, to get away from a mail house that had badly messed up billing at one point earlier on. What was the original estimated per year savings by going to the tax rolls?
So we combined the savings with potential revenue generation from doing more inspections and a bunch of other stuff. I think the savings just from the third party and the mailing and all that wasn't that huge. It was $30,000 or something like that. It's when we started looking at the other savings or revenue generation of doing more inspections and correcting bills and things like that, that we got up to ballpark of $400,000 of a delta of value to the agency.
What's the, we've had to go back to the third party. What are they charging us per year? The third party biller
Do not
currently?
know.
205,000.
205,000. So we're looking at a potential savings of 205,000.
But we do pay the county 1/4%. So
Okay.
that's why it's like they're like,
Subtracted from that.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. Anyway, we were looking for creating some savings. The one thing we didn't have in the opt-out discussion, since opt-out is going to cost us more, is whether we should offer the opt-out for an opt-out fee that's appropriate for the costs we experience. So if we're going to have that discussion this year, I'd like to know what that fee would be.
Yeah, so we did explore that because you are right, Tom, in that one customer group cannot subsidize another customer group. So if opting out and keeping you with direct billing from Monterey One Water is a more expensive service, then those customers do need to offset it. And I think going back to maybe why the board ultimately, I think, decided not to add another layer. It was my understanding at the time that if you were to set a fee, though, Prop 218 applies to any fee. So the complexity of implementing an opt-out program with an opt-out program that would cost a different amount than billing via the tax roll and resulted in an enrollment fee, then required us to go through a 218 process first. And there wasn't enough runway to do a 218 for that fee
On the timeline.
on the timeline, implement the opt-out and be ready to go with the tax, with your list by that last Monday of June board meeting where you place the fees and that rate report. Because whatever you approve at that public hearing in June, that is what gets placed on the roll. So it
Right.
gives staff about 1 month to work with the county to get that data uploaded and scrubbed and cleaned to make sure all the formatting, there's no dashes and things like that. It gives us 1 month exactly because the county moved up their deadline. It used to be August 10th and now it's August 1st. All data must be in and clean in the county system by August 1.
And in this particular situation, where if the board decides to move forward with something February 24th, that would be a little bit tight to develop the opt-out cost, go through a Prop 218 for a subset of the customers. Because we need to get that Prop 218 out by what, April 1st probably, in order to hit the May.
I was just sketching it out, and you also have to give people an opportunity to actually enroll in an opt-out program. So in my mind,
So
actually,
are you only, so you'd only be sending the Prop 218 notice to those that enroll prior to?
We'd have to find out from Jim McKilpin whether that Prop 218 has to go to our entire customer base or just those who want to opt out. And would
But
we
you
have
still
to
have
do
the
that every
45.
freaking year?
you would still have that 40, whoever got it
5
though,
days.
still has a 45-day notice
Correct.
period. So at a minimum, you're looking at mid-April, mid-April to set that fee. So I mean, we would definitely need to check with legal and explore.
Just real quick. So if you use the savings that we're getting from going to the rolls to subsidize the opt-out, I mean, you might have mentioned it, if that's possible, I mean, we're still winning in the end.
So we certainly are, but I'll let Jim talk too. And I'll just use you as an example. If you three go to the tax roll and you two opt out, there's more cost to develop an invoice and send it to you every 2 months. So even though as an entity, it's a push,
Mhm.
they in essence would be subsidizing you. And that's the issue, is having different customer classes subsidize others that we could be challenged on. Jim, can you speak to that, or if you don't want to, don't?
Yeah, I don't. No, I think we looked at this last year in connection with how you could fund some of the various aspects of this. And Paul, the way you've described it is generally right. The savings are being done for the ratepayers. And you're then going to take the quote unquote ratepayer savings to subsidize other ratepayers' expense. So it does have a potential violation of 218 in its structure if you do it that way.
May I ask a question and further complicate the issue? So if we're talking about, I'm going to make up a number again, 1,000 opt-outs. Jim, could we use the same funds that we're using for the customer assistance program, that which is not rate-based, to fund the opt-out additional charges?
Asterisk, I think so.
Okay.
And I was just gonna say as well, Paul, I think we would also need to dig in a little bit deeper on the true cost of an opt-out and what that delta would be, that non-rate based revenues.
Well,
So
I vaguely remember that it depends on how many people actually end up signing up for the opt-out, right? And so, but we would have to set the rates in advance, so it could be over, under, whatever that is.
But there's a possibility there, and we would need to look into the actual costs, like Rachel mentioned. I know Fred developed this on his own last year. I think we need to take another look at it. And lucky Lawrence gets to be brought into the fold as well. And I just learned something that Mr. Gilpin did. From now on out, whenever I speak, I'm going to say asterisk. That's just brilliant.
It's a good one.
I should say welcome to the drive up. Can I help you?
Committee member, Stefani.
Yeah, I mean, as I remember, we kind of dropped the opt-out when the Easy Smart Pay was a for sure thing.
Yes.
And at the beginning, it wasn't a for sure thing, and then the county made it a for sure thing, and it was, and then personally, I feel our staff can go talk to the people that want to opt out. So they want to opt out so they can pay their bill every other month instead of once a year or twice a year. Well, if you sit down and talk to them, you can pay your bill every month and not pay our opt-out fee. And you might be better off than you are paying every other month. So I think if you really sit down with people that have a problem with it, you can lead them right into the Easy Smart Pay.
And that was something we did find, but a lot of people, it was the first year of the program. So a lot of people were not aware of Easy Smart Pay. And we had a lot of people, actually, Mike talked to a number of people, Mike, so if you wanted to speak to this, who, as he informed them, were like, oh, thanks, I'm going to go explore this right away because I didn't know about it. But it sounds like something that could help me financially.
I think
And on the flip side of
came
that
up
too
on-
was that some of the people that you were trying to say, hey, well, you could pay it every month via this program, and they were still convinced that they didn't want to have that option either. So I just kind of go, okay, well, we'll move on.
The distinction that came up at the last meeting about that Easy Pay though was they can't just pay their M1W bill. If you opt into that program, they have to pay their entire property tax assessment along with M1W into that pay. So it's not just our payment.
Yep.
I would just offer that if the concern is those folks that are uncomfortable, maybe tight on budget, that the value of paying their taxes in totality monthly is probably going to suit them better anyways. So I don't see that being a real challenging thing for most folks. I think the biggest thing is the change. I think people are maybe not fully aware or concerned around something that's unfamiliar. But if I recall correctly, a lot of wastewater agencies do their billing this way. And to me, it just seems to make sense. Um, I was going to say something else about the opt out. Oh, the other challenge with it, even though I understand the idea of trying to meet in the middle, and if that's where we end, in order for us to move forward, and let's do that. But I would just offer that it does have a sunset. So the idea is that these folks are keeping the same, and they're not noticing anything different between now, unless they're paying an additional fee, and we'll, I guess, have that clarified. But assuming that we cover the cost, they don't notice anything different. Their life goes on the same for 2 or 3 years. And then at that point, their life is going to change. And so it's like, who's transitioning? The agency is transitioning, not that person. And I just don't, it's hard for me to find logic behind it. But again, if that's allows us to be able to make the transition, I can support that. I'm just going to share two other things. The first is Monterey's experience, and I appreciate Rachel you bringing that up earlier. When we didn't transition, the city of Monterey had already been going through the process of doing our Prop 218 and getting ready to make that transition. And so when the agency and M1W decided not to do that, the city of Monterey pressed forward with doing it. And one of the main arguments that staff made to us was that their concern was that this conversation was going to come up again in M1W, and it would save our city money and time and energy of having to make that transition. And we have folks from all political perspectives, persuasions on our council. We voted unanimously to support that because it made sense. There was no opt-out option. It was everybody is transitioning to the tax rolls. There was folks that came and spoke during our council meeting and expressed concerns, as we would typically see folks that express concerns around kind of any increase to fees, really. But this wasn't an increase to a fee, to clarify. And I can sit here today and say that we haven't heard anything from anybody since we made the transition. So I just kind of wanted to be able to share that experience, and I'll keep up with staff in regards to what feedback that we do hear, if any, and be sure to share that with the board as we move forward. And then the last thing I will say is, regardless of whether or not we do this, I think it's important for us to remember that this issue isn't going away. And I think I have to be a little bit careful because I think some of this conversation's gone into closed session, if I remember correctly, or was that an open session? About how I say, I don't even know how to say it. Some of it was in closed session, right?
Which part? Oh,
You don't have to say it like that.
yeah, probably should not go into that.
So, but my only point is that this issue isn't going away. So we're going to be having to figure out how to move forward with this. And I think that this is the smoothest way for us to move forward, is just kind of finding that pathway of making this happen so that we can move on and keep doing the business of the agency. Okay, let's take it out to public, and then maybe we can come back for any last minute comments. Let's take it out to the public. Anybody in the public wish to make comments on this item? Cookie Monster? All right, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the committee. Any last minute comments on this one? Is there a motion?
So move.
I'm assuming the staff recommendation.
Staff
Is there a
recommendation.
second?
So,
Yep, second motion is second. Please, Paul.
so in terms of the recommended action, it's that you recommend to the board to discuss and provide further direction. I had laid out sort of those 4 items that it'd be nice if the board decided yes or no on. Is that part of the motion?
Yes.
How about the 4 actions in the table?
It's the 4 actions that I laid out earlier in terms of that the BPC recommends that the board direct staff to pursue collection of M1 sewer fees with Monterey County as a new billing partner, that you direct staff to initiate a customer assistance program in association with that, if that passes, and that staff work with other member entities to move their wastewater collection fees to the Monterey tax roll, and that we schedule, advertise, and hold a public hearing on June 30th with the intent of moving it to the tax rolls. We can also, if you'd like, add in looking into the costs and structure of an opt-out, just so we can be more conversant in that in the staff report, which will go out to the full board.
Second stands.
I'm sorry, say that again?
My second.
Your second stance. I thought you said on second stance is what I thought I heard. So, okay. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, staff, for this. And thank you for all of what's to come. All right. With that, we'll go to staff reports.
You know, after that one, I think I need to defer to other staff. Or if it's anything.
We're still in the process of developing the FY26 budget. We are planning to have a short study session, maybe March or April, to look at the preliminary budget proposal.
And that's a great point. Let's add on to that. So if Lawrence is going to do one, hopefully in March, if it slides to April, but then we do have the board budget hearing at the end of, I think it's May 22nd.
Yes.
Which will be obviously the full budget and diving into it a little deeper with approval at the first board meeting in June. So that's still our process. We just wanted to give you an update because it's going to look a little different than it has in the past few years, just because we have new staff working on it. Anything else?
No.
It looks like I'll be going up to Sacramento next week, or the 19th, just to make some visits to talk about a lot of the things that we've been doing energy wise, and just try to educate their staff mainly. And if we get time with the electeds, that's great. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thank you, staff. And then we'll go to committee member comments and reports. Okay.
So just one, I made a recommendation to our general manager to look into the possibility of a interagency ultimate disaster planning exercise at some point in the future. Our general manager has asked some staff to flesh out the idea, and potentially the board the committee first may hear a proposal for a planning exercise at some point. Thank you.
Anything?
Who's that planning exercise going to be with?
Well, conceptually, it would involve all of our member agencies along with staff and possibly a number of other affected first responders in the area. So we haven't completely fleshed it out at this point. But it would be focused on our infrastructure. That would be the scenario that we would have to deal with.
All right. And with that, we will go ahead and